Hello and welcome to the World Podcast. I'm Yalda and I'm in London.
And me, Richard, and I'm in Colombia, Latin America this time.
Yeah, a new place, Richard, because of course, for the last couple of years, both of us have been traveling back and forth to Israel, covering the war there, and of course to Ukraine. So I really can't wait to hear about your travels in Colombia, and it's great to have you back on the podcast. We haven't been speaking these last few weeks.
We have not. It has been terrible. I've been missing you. I hope that you felt the same. But as you mentioned, it's great to go and check out other parts of the world and do some other reporting, because for the last 2 years or so, it's really just been ping-ponging back and forth between Israel and Gaza coverage and Ukraine. And for obvious reasons, those consumed a lot of our time. But to come here right now in Colombia, also focusing on what's going on in Venezuela, a situation that is absolutely heating up, I think is going to heat up even more. We're going to get into that.
Absolutely. And we're also going to cover that historic meeting between the interim president of Syria, if that's what I should call him, Ahmed al Sharaa, and Donald Trump, who, Ahmed al Sharaa traveled to the White House. It was quite a historic, monumental moment. So we'll be getting into that. Richard, you and I were in Syria last year in December when the Assad regime fell and we saw the rise of Ahmed al Sharaa. So this is quite a moment.
It's an extraordinary moment. Now he's in the White House. Did you see that video of him playing basketball with American generals? Just from Al-Qaeda leader, feared in Syria, a bounty on his head, to now meeting with the President of the United States and talking about new relations, sanctions lifted against him. Just an extraordinary transformation. And an extraordinary individual. Like him or hate him, he is certainly someone who will go down in the history books and has transformed himself in an amazing way. I mean, he was held in an American prison for years, and now he's in the White House. Just astonishing. So we'll talk about that, and don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple. You can watch us on YouTube. Just search for The World with Richard and Yalda.
So, Richard, as we were saying, you're currently in Colombia. I want to hear everything. We haven't spoken these last few weeks. And, the fact is, Donald Trump's foreign policy, he's reshaping entire regions. He's, looking at the situation in the Middle East, but he's also zoomed in on places like Colombia and Venezuela. Tell me what you're doing there and what's been going on.
Okay, so as we've been noticing, or there's been about 20 different kinetic strikes that the U.S. military has been carrying out on these alleged narco boats. So these are boats that are, or in one case, an improvised submarine leaving from this region and heading toward the United States, allegedly carrying drugs. So we're here because of that, because of these intensified kinetic strikes. But more importantly, because there's an enormous amount of military power in this region. 10,000 troops have already been deployed. Warships are in the area, at least one American submarine, fighter jets, drones, and more troops are on the way. So a huge amount of firepower coming to the region where I am right now, which raises the question, why? What's going on? Is the U.S. going to do a war to overthrow Maduro, and Maduro is the main target. But not only Maduro. Maduro has an ally here in Colombia, the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, who's a former rebel, a former member of the far left, a guerrilla fighter in the sort of 1970s style. So he's been an enemy of Trump. Trump calls him a lunatic. Trump calls him a narco-terrorist. And Trump is now saying that Maduro, president of Venezuela, the authoritarian dictator, that his days are numbered. So That's why I'm here. Is regime change coming in Latin America, or are we just going to see more of these drone strikes on alleged fast boats and submarines carrying drugs? And the impression that I'm getting, and the people that I'm speaking to, very serious people, believe that there is going to be some sort of military action soon.
Break this down for us a little bit, Richard, because as you say, there was Hugo Chavez leading Venezuela before Nicolas Maduro took over in, I believe, 2013. Nicolas Maduro, like Hugo Chavez before him, was and is an authoritarian dictator on the left. And, you and I have spoken about the fact that Donald Trump has great admiration for some of these strongmen, authoritarian leaders. Whether it's Xi Jinping or Recep Tayyip Erdogan or Vladimir Putin, he shows this sort of admiration for the strong man. Yet he doesn't have that level of admiration for Nicolas Maduro, frankly, because he's on the wrong side he's on the left side of politics. And he sort of targeted him during Trump 1.0, and now we're seeing that same playbook of him going after the Venezuelan leader, going after Venezuela yet again. Just break it down for us. Other than the drugs, other than the concern about things like fentanyl pouring into the United States, the immigration issues that the United States is facing, what are the main concerns for Donald Trump? Why does it appear that he is waging a war against Venezuela and Venezuela's allies, countries like Colombia?
Let's go back to the 1980s, which was the worst period here. Everyone probably remembers Pablo Escobar. And Pablo Escobar was the world's most powerful drug trader. Dominated the cocaine trade, really established the cocaine trade as a major industry, as a major political force. He operated openly. He ran this country, and it got incredibly dangerous. The government was pushed aside. He could do whatever he wanted. He would attack. He blew up an aircraft. He attacked government buildings. He attacked courts. He attacked judges. He did whatever he wanted. And that was a very dark period in Colombia in the 80s and 90s. And that coincided with a similar kind of movement across the border in Venezuela. So Venezuela had the rise, as you mentioned, of Hugo Chavez, who was another classic far-left leader who wanted worldwide revolution, believed in this sort of Marxist ideology, and thought that the Americans, the Yankees, and their capitalism were the worst thing that ever befell the region, and he wanted the Yankees out, and he wanted a new system by the workers, for the people, for the farmers, for the campesinos, and got some support in Latin America. And then when Chavez died, he passed on the system to Nicolas Maduro. And Nicolas Maduro was a bus driver, no political experience, no particular political savvy, if you will, but took on the same mantle of power, same ideology, and has kept the system going under the Hugo Chavez banner, and has run the country into the ground. It's become incredibly corrupt. It's become dangerous. It is a lawless state. Most countries don't recognize Maduro as a legitimate leader. They believe that he stole the election. So Nicolas Maduro and a few allies, including Gustavo Petro, the president of here, the former rebel, kind of, let's just say, similar ideology, they're at least ideological partners. And according to President Trump and others, they're much more than ideological partners. President Trump and his administration has said that these are both narco-terrorists, that Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, is, quote, a lunatic, that he does nothing to stop the drug trade, and that the U.S. is now going to change that situation. Why now? And people I've been speaking to believe that this is part of President Trump's larger agenda, which we've talked about in this show, of sphere of influence. And he wants this region to be the American region. and that this is his home background or the United States home turf. And if you can't control your home turf, what kind of world power are you? It's against the narcos who still produce an enormous amount of cocaine and do tremendous damage to the rainforest and do tremendous damage to the farmers, to the consumers who are consuming this dangerous product. And it has to do with China, believe it or not, because China has become the main trading partner for this region. About 20 years ago, 90% of trade in Latin America was with the United States. The U.S. was the main dominant power here. Now, most countries' main trading partner is China in the U.S.'s neighborhood. So you've got far left leaders, narco trade, spreading Chinese influence, and President Trump, who wants this region to be America's region. I think that's the larger sort of context that you can see this in. You know, President Trump has been accused of being a flip-flopper, that he always folds, he always gives in. And, you know, he threatens these tariffs or he threatens these actions, and then he backs away. Now, all these warships are here. All this military power is here. 10,000 plus troops, more on their way. If he pulls them back now, and Maduro is still in power and nothing has changed, and the president of Colombia keep insulting him, it would have an enormous cost for Trump. It would be embarrassing. So that's why I think people here believe that once you put all these guns on the table, somebody's getting shot.
So, Richard, I think you've done a great job sort of breaking this down for us, that this is, you know, not just about the strikes on these boats. It's not just about the buildup of troops. This is about a wider sphere of influence that the United States wants to have on its own backyard. So Donald Trump is basically sending a signal to Nicolas Maduro, you know, sort your house out or I'm going to remove you from power, and also sending a very direct signal and warning to China. This is my backyard. You know, stop messing around here, and I am not afraid to take action. But what you have just said and outlined there is, you know, is there a concern that even though Donald Trump is building up these troops, making these sorts of warnings and threats, that they are perhaps trying to call his bluff? Because at one point, didn't Nicolas Maduro say, listen, I want to work this out with you? And Donald Trump basically, again, if I were to swear on this podcast, basically said, you know,
Yalda.
Yeah. He basically
I think we still have like an X rating for you because of you.
Are they likely to call Donald Trump's bluff here and say, okay, look, we're scared, we're in hiding, but you know, the leader of Colombia is saying, you know, I'm going to take you on, essentially.
President Trump has openly said that Maduro's days are numbered, and he's doing all of these strikes against the boats. Now the Pentagon is talking about it. They're putting out the videos. They're bragging about it. They're deploying all of these, you know, conventional troops and special forces and drones and aircraft, and they're all openly talking about getting rid of Maduro, saying that his days are numbered. And that message has gotten to the Venezuelans. Maduro is nervous, clearly, and did say, oh, yeah, well, maybe we can work a deal, because Venezuela not just has vast amounts of oil, it also has rare earth minerals. And a former Colombian official, senior, and I were talking at length, and I've spoken to Western diplomats here, but speaking to people on the ground. I've had a lot of conversations over the last week or so, believe that the goal of these overt strikes and this overt military buildup, and President Trump even saying that he's authorized covert actions in Venezuela, is to convince Maduro's inner circle to dump him.
Before we focus on the situation with Syria and talk a little bit more about Ahmed al Sharaa, the historic meeting at the White House, you know, just to finally just sort of grasp the situation.
No, by all means, it's been fascinating. Like I said, it's been fascinating to be here. It's an interesting time, and stuff's coming. Most people believe that there's going to be airstrikes
what I want to know.
on the narco labs, like, pretty soon.
That's what I want to know. The mood on the street, the feeling of, are we going to start seeing regime changes in these places? Nicolas Maduro has been accused of all sorts of human rights abuses. So, there won't be any tears for Nicolas Maduro and the way that he has run Venezuela, frankly, into the ground, despite its, the natural resources it has, despite the fact that it's a petro state. People are living, in dire situations and below the poverty line.
Yeah, the mood on the street is that this is not just bluster. People don't think that that he's just doing this for show. So the belief is that before the end of the year, which is, we'll be here soon, that there will probably be some sort of kinetic strikes, land strikes in Venezuela. Not necessarily Caracas, not an American invasion, but to send an even stronger message to the people around Maduro, if they haven't gotten the message already, that if they get rid of him, then there can be a new political process, that there could be a transitionary phase, that maybe the generals get to, keep their power or keep some of their stuff, their houses and their money, and that you could have a transitionary government for a year or two and then new elections, but that there would be a regime change, and that the hope would have a domino effect. So the belief among many in the Trump administration, particularly Rubio, the Secretary of State, and he's acting national security advisor, that if you can get rid of Maduro, that it will have a chain reaction and get rid of sort of change politics across this region, get rid of these extreme left who in some cases made these alliances with the narcos, and change the politics and spread more American influence in the region, push China out, push the Cuban intelligence out, and transform politics here. Easier said than done.
Yeah, I was just going to say
that's the concept anyway.
Well, we know from other places and other attempts at regime change how well it's gone. So I guess it's more the Trump administration is probably looking at regime destruction and then hoping that somehow they will then be able to figure out regime change once they've completely decapitated and weakened the leadership of Nicolas Maduro. But we're going to go to a break, Richard, and when we come back, let's discuss the regime change that took place almost 12 months ago in Syria, the toppling of Bashar al-Assad, and talk about the new president of Syria, Ahmed al Sharaa, a former jihadi fighter who has now found himself in the Oval Office. The collapse of the Assad regime, he fled to Moscow and enter Ahmed al Sharaa, the rebel fighter, the jihadi who swiftly moved from Idlib down south towards the capital Damascus and took over Syria very, very quickly, much to, frankly, the world's surprise, to his own surprise. And when we look at his resume, my God, is it colorful. He went from being a bomb maker in Iraq to, frankly, a bomb maker for Al Qaeda, spending years in prisons. He has American blood on his hands. Then going to Syria and forming the affiliate to Al Qaeda, the Al Nusra Front. And then, being this rebel fighter that had to hold the area of Idlib with his rebel fighters. And I was speaking to a former U.S. ambassador yesterday who said, in 2018, we basically sent a very clear message to the Russians: don't target this guy and his rebel fighters because we need him. He will be useful to us at some point. Now, he said, Ambassador Jeffries was his name. He said, we didn't think that he would end up becoming the president of Syria, but that's frankly what happened. And then these extraordinary scenes when he arrived in New York at the General Assembly in May, where he spoke at the UN General Assembly. He sat down with the U.S. commander who had arrested him, General David Petraeus, and then to find him, the first Syrian leader since Syria became independent from France in 1946, to enter the White House. Absolutely astonishing and remarkable journey for him and for Syria.
Where do you even start with someone who's had such a colorful career? And he's been welcomed by the West. He's being welcomed by Trump. And Trump says, oh, he's a good guy. He's a strong guy. He's a tough guy. I mean, he is a tough guy. I don't think anyone would doubt that.
Would doubt that. In fact, when Donald Trump described him as a tough, attractive guy, he did an interview with, I believe, 60 Minutes in the United States, and he said, I mean, do you have any doubt that I'm an attractive, tough guy? So he sort of, thought it was quite humorous what Donald Trump was saying. But Richard, let's have a listen to what Donald Trump had to say when he met with Ahmed al Sharaa, because it's not often that, first of all, Donald Trump has a meeting with a world leader in the Oval Office where it's not open to the press and he takes the back door. But it's unusual to have a former jihadi, with a $10 million bounty on his head coming to visit you at the White House. Let's have a listen to what Trump had to say.
He's a very strong leader. He comes from a very tough place, and he's a tough guy. I liked him. I get along with him, the new president of Syria. And we'll do everything we can to make Syria successful, because that's part of the Middle East. We have peace now in the Middle East, first time that anyone can remember that ever happening.
So Donald Trump speaking there, they're working to lift all those sanctions from Syria to try and make it economically more prosperous, and that is one of the motivations of Ahmed al Sharaa. Without sort of rehashing everything that's happened over the course of the last 12 months and what a remarkable journey it's been for Ahmed al Sharaa, the big question now is going to be, he is able to adapt. He's like a chameleon, but is he a, refreshingly pragmatic Islamist, or is he an incredibly untrustworthy man? Syria is a mixing pot, a society that is a melting pot of different sort of sectarian groups, religious groups. They don't necessarily want a former dictator to flee. The Assad regime had a grip on this nation for decades, from Bashar al-Assad's father to himself, and then the 13-year civil war that we saw that, frankly tore this nation apart. Millions were left displaced, almost 500,000 people dead, and it culminated in Bashar al-Assad fleeing the country. Ahmed al Sharaa now has an impossible task of uniting this nation. We're seeing ongoing attacks on the Druze community, ongoing attacks on the Christian community, ongoing attacks on the Alawite community. The Kurds feel unsafe. It's extraordinary that Ahmed al Sharaa has been, now told, come into the coalition and the war against ISIS that we have, that the United States leads. But he has an impossible task to try and unite a fractured nation, to try and bring together the Syrian people, to make it not just economically viable, but to be able to bring all these communities together. So frankly, we don't see another civil war erupting in Syria.
Damascus is a beautiful, wonderful city, ancient city. It's a multi-religious society with different religious and ethnic groups. The Israelis are still occupying a part of the country. They are intervening to defend the Druze community, and these minorities, the Christians. There's a tiny Jewish community, although he's been working with them. The Christians and the Alawites, primarily the Druze, are very nervous. They're very nervous that this Islamist strongman is going to come in, and he's just going to be a new dictator, and he's going to be a new dictator with a heavy-handed Islamic flavor. So Bashar al-Assad was a dictator, but he was really just a kleptocrat. He was just a thief. He didn't have an ideological bent. The bent in Syria the mentality under Syria under Bashar al-Assad was, he is king, his family is the royal dynasty. I would say there was no ideological overtone other than we're in charge, everyone else stay in line, or you're going to be thrown in one of the worst gulags in the prison. This guy is, he is ideological. He's ideologically flexible, but people don't know him. And I think that is what a lot of the fear is. When we were in Damascus and talking to people, they were happy that the Syrian civil war was over because it was so horrendous. But then they're like, well, who is this guy? Is he a wolf in sheep's clothing? Is he going to impose later on some sort of strict Islamic Sharia law? Is he going to repress women? What is he going to do? But so far, the steps have been relatively encouraging. And the United States, as you mentioned, is primarily interested in him because they want him to help fight ISIS. They're good. And I've spent time with his forces in Syria. I spent about, I don't know, it was a week, maybe 2 weeks with them running around. No, I think it was about a week actually, and was with his forces the entire time. They're disciplined. They're hardworking. When they would come, he or one of the commanders would call them over. They would run. They would generally, not smokers, pretty healthy, focused, and nobody who you would want to fight in a man-to-man fight, AK to AK. You wouldn't want to fight against these guys. So I think the U.S. is trying to say, okay, we'll bring him back in the fold. Maybe that'll encourage him to be more moderate, and he can be an incredibly powerful force to fight against ISIS and the really radical fringe, the kind of people who blow up theaters in France or inspire people to pick up swords and go on killing sprees in the UK.
And Richard, I mean, we saw he was quite fit, shooting those hoops with the head of CENTCOM on that basketball court. And Donald Trump said he's had a rough past. So we'll have to wait and see, how it pans out for Ahmed al Sharaa. He does have an uphill battle, but he also has a lot of people who are rallying behind him in the United States, in the West, Syrian diaspora who want this to work. So, again, we'll have to wait and see whether he's going to be able to adapt and be pragmatic, or whether, as you say, the concern that so many have, that he is a sheep or a wolf in sheep's clothing. We always do the predictions, Richard. Before I let you and get back to your work in Colombia, what are you watching? I guess you're looking at the situation in the region right now where you are.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm focused on Latin America. So I'll do it here. I would say that there'll be some military strikes against narco labs, facilities inside Venezuela on the ground before the end of the year. And I think there'll be increased pressure on the inner circle around Maduro to hand him over. And I don't know if they're going to bend to that pressure or they'll double down, but I think there will be a more intense campaign to let the Venezuelans do regime change themselves with this offer of carrots and sticks. I would say kinetic strikes on the ground in Venezuela relatively soon, which we haven't seen yet. It's so far just been the boats.
Richard, for me, I guess we've been seeing the devastation, the horror show that has unfolded in Sudan over the course of the last couple of weeks. I'm looking at the situation in South Sudan because, of course, that is one of the youngest countries on the planet, and there are rival factions right now at each other's throats yet again, and potentially we could see another civil war erupt there. So while the focus has been, frankly, not a huge amount of focus on the humanitarian situation and the devastating crisis that has gripped Sudan for the last few years, I think the situation in the south could erupt. So I'm monitoring the situation there.
Well, before we go, people should also know Colombia, it's an extraordinarily beautiful country.
Oh, wow. I've never been. So it's amazing.
You should go up in the mountains. I mean, we're in the Andes here, but there's also coast. It has the second most biodiverse country on the planet. with such, deep. When you think of jungle, this is jungle.
Wow.
I'm in Bogota now, but I was up on the Caribbean coast talking to fishermen. And by the way, the fishermen are terrified now to go out to sea because they're worried if they go too far from the shore, they're going to get droned. But just, getting the opportunity to fly around and drive around this country, if you walk, 2-3 miles just into the bush, you may never find your way out again.
Wow.
It's dense, it's dark, it's original growth. So it's quite an extraordinary place to visit. But unfortunately, crime is getting worse right now. Things are heading, I would say, for many people would say, heading in the wrong direction over the last year or so. But if they could get a better government and get rid of the narcos, or at least control the situation more, and not have pockets that are ungoverned spaces run by drug lords who surround their fields with landmines. So if you can contain that or clean that up, this region could have a tremendous future.
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to all of your reports and catching up on what you find next week as well. Really good to talk to you, Richard, and thank you to our listeners for listening this week.